I think in US cotton had always been very expensive for us in terms of the basis. That's one of the reasons, and also the source is a bit far. It's the transit time is longer to get US cotton. That's why I think it has been. But there, for contamination-free branded yarn, US is definitely one of the biggest preferences in Bangladesh.
Can I take liberty of asking the last question?
Sure.
What is the average inventory of the raw material as well as the finished product yarn in the Bangladesh market? Average inventory. Average inventory of the cotton.
Inventory?
And average inventory of the yarn unsold if it is.
That would differ from mill to mill, but now it's
Average.
quite high. I would say more than at least a month, even more for some people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sarkar, for that intensively informative session. Sir, I would like you to stay on stage. Sorry. I would like to invite Atul Ganatra, President, Cotton Association of India, to come on stage to present the Suvin Ratna to Mr. Sarkar. May I now invite Kai Hughes, Executive Director, International Cotton Advisory Committee, to kindly come on stage and share his views with us.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, I'd like to extend a very warm thank you to Cotton Association of India for inviting myself and Dr. Kranthi to come and talk to you about global challenges. So I'm going to talk to you today about challenges in a global context, and tomorrow Dr. Kranthi is going to look at India in more depth. So the first question is, what are the challenges for cotton ahead? Most of those you've discussed today, and when I was sitting down the other night looking at the challenges that we face, I wrote a list of all the challenges that we are dealing with in the ICAC. So as you can see, there's a huge list, and most probably that list could go on. So if I look at that list, I've tried to pick a few of those out for you today. For me, the two most important challenges are climate change and yields, and I'm going to talk about those in a minute. But I've tried to choose a few others, the ones that are in bold, that will be of interest to you as traders. But let's first of all start with the most topical one at the moment, trade tariffs. And if we look at the global picture, here you can see the USA has had the world's share of exports since 1990. And I want you to keep your eyes on Brazil and the USA. So as we go through the slides, just keep watching those. If we look at world cotton exports over the last 2 years, first of all, you see for Uzbekistan, for 18-19, you see that their exports are reducing a lot as they move to internal consumption. Australia, we're seeing a slight increase for 18-19. India, a drop to 800,000 tons, an increase in West Africa. But look at Brazil, up to 1.4 million tons, and then a drop for the USA down to 3.3 million tons. So in the global context, the USA is still the largest exporter in the world with 35% of the market. But let's see where it goes. So let's just now look at China. So China has been the largest trading partner for the United States for cotton for years. So overall, the China cotton imports from the USA have averaged around 33%. Now, the tariffs came in July 2018. So what's happened since then? So in this slide, if you look at the last 2 quarters for 2018, in 3 and 4, what you suddenly see is Brazil and Australia exporting to China a great deal more. Now, if we look at this picture, this most probably will give you a better view of it, because what you see there is from October 2018, a huge spike from Brazil. And where you would expect a spike from the USA in about November, December, you don't. So what is actually happening is that Brazil is taking up the slack from the USA. So where is the USA cotton actually going? Well, in simple terms, it's going to Vietnam, with some going to Indonesia and some going to Pakistan. So let's now have a look at what I consider to be the 2 major challenges for us globally throughout the world. The first one is climate change. The negative effects of climate change are shown on this graph. And I want to draw your attention to the ones in bold. Climate change will result in lower yields, lower fiber quality, extreme weather events will affect the diversity of the crop, and will also affect the crop season. But the main thing to take away from the effects of climate change is that it changes the biodiversity of the crop. And that is a very difficult thing to understand. But climate change also has some positive aspects. It increases, it will increase CO2, may increase the yields in well-watered crops, and higher temperatures will increase the growth of the plant. So how is climate change actually affecting us here? So if we look at India, what you see with the yields in Gujarat was a drop of by 50% over the last year. Why? Because there was a drought. So this is a really tangible example of how climate change can affect yields. But also, as you can see from this slide, slight changes in humidity and heat could cause outbreaks of whitefly. And if you look at on the right-hand side, you can see that where climate change can create conditions where other pests then transfer into the cotton crop, like the fall armyworm. So what can be done? Well, the simple thing is that we need to develop climate-resistant cultivars. We need to understand what insects are naturally selected in rising CO2 levels. We need to look at what is happening on a regional basis and making policies at a regional basis. And this is really, really important, that we need global policies for climate change, and we need to then transfer those down to the local level. So now quickly looking at yields. And we've spoken a lot about yields today, but I'm hopefully going to give you another perspective on yields. So world population is expected to reach 8.5 billion in 2030. So the UN said that we would be growing by 1.15 billion by that time. So it's 1.15 billion in the next 12 years, 11 years. So that equates to a rise in population of 371 in the top 5 nations in Asia. And by 2030, India will outstrip China as the most populous country in the world, with a population of 1.5 billion. And Nigeria will be the most populous country in Africa at 264 million. So how do we clothe all this additional population? Well, it's difficult to increase acreage, especially as it will have to compete with food. So we need to increase yields. And the potential to increase yields has got to be in places, in countries, where the yields are below average. So by looking at this slide here, you can see that if we increase the yields in Maharashtra to the world average, we would produce an additional 1.83 million tons, just in that one state. And then if we look at it in India overall, just to increase the yields to the global average of 780, India would produce an additional 3.6 million tons. And as we're talking globally, let's look at Africa. So sub-Saharan Africa, if they increase their yields to the global average, then that would produce an additional 2 million tons. So the potential is in India and it is in Africa. Last week, I visited the Ginning Training Center in Nagpur. And when I was there, I realized the importance of ginning on cotton quality. Now, the Ginning Training Center in Nagpur trains people in the different ginning technologies, but it also trains farmers in what they're supposed to do with the cotton before they bring it to a gin. So to remove contamination, for example. And it was a very fascinating trip. And so I'm going to share some of the things I learned with you on that trip to the Ginning Training Center. First of all, I realized how important it was to select the correct ginning technology. So ginning technology primarily depends on the harvesting practices, the trash content, humidity, moisture content, fiber length, and fuzziness. But it does not, and it should not, depend on capital cost. So often I'm told that people choose ginning technology because it uses less manpower or it is quicker. It's really important to use the correct ginning technology. Now, you in India use the double roller ginning. And as you can see from here, this is what double rolling ginning takes in terms of the quality of cotton. But the first one there is suitable for clean cotton. And I've heard a lot today about contamination and trash and humidity, moisture content in the cotton, sorry. And if you look at this slide, which is the cotton ginning output, you can see that India is at the bottom. Well, if you have hand-picked cotton, you would think that the cotton is going to be relatively clean. So there's got to be something else, if there's trash in it and there's contamination in it, to make India be at the bottom of that list for the ginning outturn. And interestingly, as I discovered at that center, it's all to do with the cotton seed. So you have larger cotton seed, which means less fiber content. You also have a fourth and fifth picking, which again means that you have less fiber compared to seed. Right, moving on for a few little things that I thought I'd mention to you. Who's ever heard of the green button? Put your hand up. No one. Okay, well, this is something that you should be aware of. The green button is a project run by Germany, and German policy and law is going to be implemented at the end of 2019, possibly to 2020, which says that all apparel coming into Germany must be fully sustainable and fully traceable. All apparel coming into Germany must be fully sustainable and fully traceable. Now, Europe is likely to then adopt that standard in the year after that. And Europe policy is now moving away from sustainability to ethical sustainability. So it's not just looking at environmental sustainability, it's also now concentrating very much on social responsibility, social sustainability, like forced labor and child labor. So you need to be aware of that. And when we talk about fully traceable, what does that mean? So there's now a number of technologies out there that are promising traceability through the system. Will it actually match the German or the European definition of fully traceable? I don't know. The argument hasn't been, the debate hasn't happened yet. We just don't know. So you need to be aware that that is on the horizon, and you need to be thinking ahead and making sure that your products are going to be fully traceable and they need to be fully sustainable. Another little point I thought I'd mention is knowledge transfer. If you look at USA, Australia, and Brazil, research is often funded by the private sector, so it's private sector led. Here in India, there is a disconnect between the private sector and researchers. So you don't actually get your problems solved. So it's really important that the private sector actually engages with researchers, talks to them about the problems, and gets the researchers to solve those problems. Here in India, researchers engage with government. Private sector doesn't actually engage with the two. So, I've come with some problems, some challenges, but like everything, there needs to be some solutions and initiatives. And the first one that we've developed in ICAC is the Soil and Plant Health app. Now this, today you launched an app, and I'm very much aware that there's lots of apps out there, but this one, let me tell you, I promise, is very different. So what will this app do? Well, this app is unique in that it is geared towards the illiterate farmer. So this means that it can react to the voice. It doesn't rely on writing. It's not like a library. And most importantly of all, it actually talks to the person in their own language. So we've developed this app with Cotton Incorporated. The app has been developed here